everybody, welcome back for another Sippin' on Sunshine video. We are on video number 5 today. This is the first video in the series in the new room, and I just noticed there's going to be shadows. There's a solar tube up there in the ceiling that's kind of like a skylight, except it's round and it diffuses the light throughout the room. I can't turn that off, so I'll try and be careful of the shadow. Today we're going to work on flowers 1, 2, and 3, the butterfly, and the strawberries. We're actually going to start with the strawberries today. For flowers 1, 2, and 3, flower 1 has 2 parts. We stitch out some dragonfly wings, and then we stitch out the block. When we go to stitch out the block, if you have a large enough hoop, you'll be able to fit flowers 1, 2, and 3 all together in one hooping. I'll show you how to do that today. And then the last one we'll work on is the butterfly block. I am using the fabric kit. I've gone over my stabilizers and batting before. Really quick, if you haven't yet cut your batting. For the strawberries, you're going to need a 7.5 inch square of batting. Flowers 1 and 2, 7.5 by 5.5. Flower 3, 7.5 by 3.5. And for the butterfly block, 5.5 by 11.5. We're going to start with the strawberries. I am doing the background quilting. The background quilting for the strawberry block is 6.5 inches square. I'll be using my 8-inch square hoop for that, loaded with the stabilizer that I'm using. It's called an HBI no-show mesh. It's extremely similar to Kimberbell's light mesh cutaway. I'll go ahead and get that hooped into my 8-inch square hoop. Let's head over to the machine. I'm on a baby lock meridian. My files are on USB. There's the other solar tube. These are things that you really don't find out about until you're in your room. I'll have to see what I can do about that. Today we're going to go ahead and work with it, and you might also see there's a little blanket that's draped over the sheer curtains. I found out that the windows are so big and it's very light and airy in here, but it was causing a reflection this morning when I was filming. Let's go ahead and bring up our files. We're going to start with the quilting file. We need KDQ 529 drink 3 6x6. So KDQ 529 drink 3, and then we're going to look for 6x6. I also have some workers out there. They're finishing up some things outside, so you can excuse my hand for a moment. I'll try to keep them out of the frame. Let's go ahead and set our quilting, and then we're going to add our strawberry block right here. Go ahead and hit set. And embroidery, we're ready to go. We're going to start with the color linen. I'm using Floriani and Simthreads. I might even have a new grow thread in there as well. This is the Floriani color I'm using for linen. Since we're a few videos into the series, I'm going to go up through the background quilting. When we started working on the quilt blocks, I went step by step through the quilting. We're going to go ahead and move through that a little bit faster. I'm going to run it all together and set it to music. We'll have our batting placement, tack down, trim your batting, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting. That'll all be run together. The background quilting is done. We're going to switch to the color Monarch. This is the color I'm using for Monarch. We're going to stitch out the placement line for strawberry number 2. Strawberry number 2 is the red felt if you're using the embellishment kit. We're going to tack it down and trim. It has no additional detail stitching around the outside. Once you've got that trimmed, you're going to stitch out the strawberry 1 placement line. Grab your strawberry 1 fabric. I have the whole square. I didn't trim it. If you watched the fabric cutting video, if there was ever a little square or a small piece of fabric and it was only used in one place, rather than trim it, I just threw the whole piece in the bag where it belonged because we're going to cut this away anyway. Let's stitch out the strawberry 1 tack down line, and after you stitch the tack down, trim away the extra. I've got that trimmed. The next step is the strawberry 1 decorative outline. This is looking good. Something extra you can do if you want to add some dimension to it, you could use some of the flexi foam behind this strawberry here. I would just leave the felt one as is and add the flexi foam behind this strawberry and the one we're going to stitch out now. Let's stitch out the strawberry 3 placement line. We're going to do the same thing with strawberry 3. Place your fabric over the line. We'll stitch the tack down, trim around the outside, and then stitch out the decorative outline. These are looking really cute. I do think these would look even better with some of the flexi foam behind it. It would really make them pop. We're going to switch to our water soluble thread. It says top thread and bobbin thread. So go ahead and switch that out. Once you've got your water soluble thread up top and in the bobbin, you can stitch out the very top placement line. You want to grab your leaves felt, cover those placement lines. Got a little piece of tape up there. We're going to tack it down and then trim. That's all stitched out. I already took out the water soluble bobbin and the water soluble top thread. If you're following along with your instructions, we're on page 21, number 11. You'll see it has the color here for aloe. It says change the top thread and change the bobbin thread to a neutral color. Just put your regular bobbin thread back in. I'm going to put aloe on the machine because we're going to stitch out the placement line, place the felt, and do the tack down and decorative, and we need to do that in aloe. Regular bobbin thread is already in my machine, and here is the color number I am using for aloe. I'm going to put that on and we'll stitch out that placement line. The placement line is stitched out. I'm going to grab my leaves felt. We'll make sure we cover that placement line, and it's going to stitch the tack down and some details at the same time. After that's all stitched out, we'll trim everything that's outside of those stitch lines, and that's all we'll be doing for the leaves. Once you've got those trimmed, you can go ahead and stitch out the stems fill. The last thing to stitch out are the seed details. They have that in the color Buttercup. The color I picked for Buttercup is a really, really bright yellow. I think that's just going to look weird. I'm going to swap out and use the color that I have for Butter instead. This is more of a darker golden yellow. It looks more like strawberry seeds, and we've got this nice orange gold flower in the background. I think this is going to look better. So I'm going to stitch out my strawberry seeds with this color. The strawberry seeds are all stitched out. This looks great. This block is going to trim to 6.5 inches square. Normally I do all the trimming at the end, but we're doing a lot of blocks today. Let's go ahead and trim this really quick. I've got this centered in my 6.5 inch square orange pop ruler. We've cut with these before. It's on my rotating cutting mat. I'm going to go ahead and trim this, and then we're going to move on to the next block. We're going to start on the flowers. We have flowers 1, 2, and 3. The first thing we're going to do is part A. We have to do this separately. This uses wash away stabilizer. Kimberbell makes a great wash away stabilizer. That's what that looks like. I have a big roll of this HBI wash away stabilizer. I'm going to be using that today. This is a small file for the wings. It might fit in a 4x4 hoop, but the smallest hoop I have for my machine is a 5x7. So I'm going to load some wash away stabilizer, my 5x7, then we're going to head over to the machine. We're going to bring up the file for the wings. I think I forgot to show, as always, folding metal book stand, my Sippin on Sunshine needle minder. I did order some curtains for in here to try and help cut down on the glare. Hopefully that will take care of it. All we're looking for is flower 1 part A. It's right here. It says 4x4 flower 1. Go ahead and load that. You want to put the color Clover on your machine. We'll check, make sure you've got your wash away stabilizer. The color is Clover. We're going to stitch out the Dragonfly wings placement line. You should have 2 pieces of tulle, that's the white kind of fishnetty kind of stuff, and a piece of mylar. It says to place the tulle, tape it in place, then the mylar, tape it in place, and then the tulle, tape it in place. I'm going to place all 3 really carefully and tape them all at the same time. I am going to take this off the machine and go turn off the ceiling fan. This stuff will blow around. It's very lightweight. I've got everything taped into place. I didn't have any trouble taping all 3 at the same time. The instructions tell you to match your bobbin thread to the top thread. If you want to do that, go ahead and wind a bobbin with the Clover color. I'm not going to do that. I have the bobbin case that does not have the adjustable tension, so I can only use a 90 weight bobbin thread. Embroidery thread is 30 to 40 weight depending on what you're using. Make sure you know what's okay to use in your machine. So I have clover on top and then the white underneath. If you have the ability to match the bobbin thread, you can go ahead and do that. We're going to stitch out the Dragonfly wings tack down line. Once you've got that tacked down, you can remove the tape and then trim everything away outside of the tack down lines. Once you've got everything trimmed, you can stitch out the Dragonfly wings decorative fill. I did have a thread break on that. It was right in the center where everything's sort of intersecting. You can feel it. There's sort of a bump here and you may have a thread break there, so keep an eye on your machine. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the Dragonfly wings satin outline. That's all stitched out. What you can do next is take it out of the hoop. You can trim it close to the outside of the wings and then use a damp Q-tip or a sponge brush to get rid of the extra water-soluble stabilizer. Or if you don't want to have to worry about trimming accurately, just kind of trim around it, put it in a bowl of cool water, let the water-soluble stabilizer dissolve, and then lay it flat to dry. We're going to be attaching these in part B. Here's the wings. I went ahead and trimmed around the outside. I'm just going to put some water on this swab, and then you can go around like this and dissolve that little bit that's left on the edges. And that way you don't have to soak the whole thing. I'm going to show you the back of mine. I didn't change my bobbin thread. It's white. When we attach it to the quilt, it's going to be attached like that. You can see what it looks like without changing the bobbin thread. Up to you. If you don't want to change the bobbin thread, that's what it's going to look like. I'm going to get rid of the rest of this stabilizer, and then we're going to load flowers 1, 2, and 3 all in one hooping. We're going to load the quilting and the embroidery files. Let's go ahead and load our quilting files. Flower 1 and flower 2 use the same quilting file. We need KDQ 528 Insect 7 4x6. Let's find the 4x6 right here. I'm going to hit set. I'm going to move it out of the way. Now I want to duplicate that. Instead of hitting add, I'm going to use this button right here. This is the border duplicate. The button above it is a regular duplicate. This button is the border duplicate. What happens when you use the border duplicate? It'll work through the same step on both items at the same time. So let's go ahead and add that, and then I'll show you what I mean. I think I can add one to the side. So this is right and left. I can add one to the side. I'm going to go ahead and space that out a little bit. That's plenty of room for me. I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to hit OK. These are going to stitch out first, and what it's going to do is do the batting placement, batting placement, batting tack down, batting tack down. So whatever it does here, it will immediately do here because we use that border duplicate key. When you use the regular duplicate key, which is now grayed out, it would work through this entire file first and then move over to this one. I want to add flower 3 to that. Let's pull up the quilting file. It's the same quilting file. It's that KDQ 528 Insect 7. This time we need the 2x6 size. So we'll drop in the 2x6. Just move it down. I've got a nice large hoop. I can fit all of that in there. These are just the quilting files. Now we have to add our embroidery files. But since we added these first, what it's going to do is stitch these first, then this, and then it's going to move on to our embroidery files, which we're going to add right now. So let's go ahead and find flowers 1, 2, and 3. Under embroidery files, I need to find this flower 1, flower 2, flower 3. I'm going to drop that in, and it's going to drop it on the center of my screen. I'm going to need to move that and make sure it's in the right place. I can move it like this. That actually looks pretty good. Oh, now, do you see that? It's kind of shifted over that way. You can see I've got almost a double line right there. You can go edit, move, and use the arrows. Make sure you get it nice and exact. That's as far over as it can go that way. And that's as far up, and since I pushed that quilting file all the way up and over, I know that's centered. Let's hit OK. Let's add flower number 2. Flower 2. Same thing. I'm going to go ahead and drag it up and over as far as it can go. I can double check with my move and my arrows. This one looks like it might even need to be moved down just a hair. That was too far. And over a little bit. That looks good. It should look like you have a solid outside line. So when you're lining these up, you have something like that where you're kind of seeing a double line. It's not quite in the right spot. That looks good. We'll hit OK. And then let's get flower number 3. Flower 3. I'm going to hit set. And I'm just going to use the arrows for this. Now, if you don't have a hoop big enough to do this, you'll just stitch out one at a time. They'll stitch out the same way. I'm just doing this to show how you can squeeze everything into one hoop if you've got a big hoop. One too far. That looks good. So we've got flower 1, flower 2, flower 3. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save this to my machine. If something happens, I want to be able to bring it up in the same order. We have an electrician coming this afternoon, so the chances of something happening are pretty high. So we want to make sure you save that to our machine. Let's go ahead and hit embroidery. And you'll see here I've got a box. You see how you've got the same thread twice? Because it's going to work through the background quilting for this one and this one at the same time. So there's your batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting. Let's go ahead and go forward so I can show you this in case you've never seen that before. See how it does everything twice? So that was our batting placement, the batting tack down, the fabric placement, the fabric tack down, and then you'll see 2 quilting files. It'll quilt over here, it'll quilt over here, and then it's going to go down here for the quilting. So that's the batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting. All the background quilting will get done first, and then it's going to go over here and go through all the embroidery on this block, all the embroidery on this block, and then all the embroidery on this block. I'm going to put the light mesh cutaway in my largest hoop, which is a 9.5 by 14, back this up to the beginning, and we'll get started. To get started for our quilting, I'm going to put linen on my machine. All 3 of these blocks have linen as the background color for the quilting. I have my light mesh cutaway in my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. The first series of steps are going to be exactly the same as we've been doing. We're going to move through the background quilting. You'll see it work on the top 2 first and then the bottom one. Since we've done several blocks with background quilting, I'm going to go ahead and run it all together. It's all using the linen color. All of our quilting is done. You can see up here the fabrics are really close together. They don't overlap. I've got a little bit outside of the stitch line, more over here. It doesn't matter. This is the tack down and trimming line, so even though there's only a little bit over here, that's fine because we're going to be trimming right on that line when we're done. We're going to start on flower 1. The first color we're going to need is clover, and we're going to stitch out the stem and leaf fills. Next, we're going to switch to the color aloe and stitch out the leaf detail. That's it for the leaf detail. Get the color tango, and we're going to stitch out the flower 1 placement line. Grab your flower 1 fabric. It says place it right side up. It's a solid. There's no interfacing on the back. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure you cover those placement lines. Then we'll stitch the tack down, trim everything that's outside the tack down line, and then stitch out the flower 1 decorative outline. I've got that trimmed. Don't worry if you can't get all the way into the little notches because we're going to stitch a decorative outline you're never going to notice. Switch to the color linen and we're going to stitch out the flower 1 center fill. Next we're going to work on flower 2. Grab the color grotto blue. We're going to stitch out the placement line. We'll place our flower 2 fabric, which does have the fusible on the back, tack it down, trim, and then stitch the decorative satin outline. I'm going to go ahead and run all that together. It's very similar to what we just did. The only difference is instead of this decorative outline, it's a satin outline. We're going to switch to Mercury. This is the one color of glide that I do have, and we're going to stitch out the flower 2 inner petals fill, and then after that we're going to switch to the color hickory and stitch out the flower 2 center details. I'll go ahead and run those 2 steps together. Apologies for the noise. I've got people with ladders right outside my window. 2 is done. We're going to work on the dragonfly. Leave the color hickory on your machine. We're going to stitch out the dragonfly wings placement area. Placement area stitched out. It's like a little tiny oval. We're going to place the wings. You want to place them with, I'm going to call it the smile, toward the top of the block. If you have them this way, it kind of looks like they're frowning. You don't want that side up. You want smile side up. The center of the dragonfly wings is going to go right over that placement line. You shouldn't be able to see it underneath the dragonfly wings. And we're going to tape it in place. It shows tape going down the middle of the wing, and then the next picture, it's on the outside of the wing. The Kimberbell paper tape's pretty wide. I'm going to put it on the outside. If you tape the middle of the wing, it's going to run across the center here, and we're going to be stitching across the center, so I don't want tape on the center of my dragonfly wings. Next, you want to grab your wash away topping. It's kind of like thick saran wrap. Don't worry if it's wrinkled. Go ahead and place that over the dragonfly wings, and then we want to tape that into place. We don't want that to move while we're stitching. You don't have to smooth out any of the wrinkles. It doesn't matter. It's going to come off. Got everything taped into place. I'm going to slide my hoop back onto the machine, and we're going to stitch the dragonfly wings tack down line. Next, we're going to stitch out the dragonfly body fill, and it has us do that over the wash away topping, so leave that there and stitch out the body fill. That's all stitched out. I did have a thread break. Again, this area right here in the center, it's very thick and you're stitching right over it, so you may have a thread break. What you want to do now is go ahead and get rid of the topping. It's going to peel off. It is a wash away topping, but you see how easy it peels off? If there's any left at the end, you can spray it with water and wash it away. I'm actually going to leave the tape on the wings because I'm going to be working on the other 2 blocks in this hoop. I don't want these flipping up. I'm just going to leave that. I have to rethread. And then we're going to stitch out the trimming guides. It looks like it's going to stitch out a couple of guides in the corners for this, for trimming. And it has us doing that in the color hickory. This block is all done. These little trimming guides, they're pretty much right on top of the lines that were there before. When we go to trim, we'll see if they help at all. We're going to move on to flower number 2. We're going to start out with grotto blue, and we're going to stitch out the flowers, fills, and then after that, we're going to stitch with linen the flowers details. I'm going to run these 2 steps together. I've got some jump threads with the linen. I'm going to leave those until the end. We're going to work on the flower stems and leaves fills, and then the grass tuft fill. These are 2 separate steps on your machine, but they're both stitched out with the color clover. I'll go ahead and run those 2 together. I'm going to switch out to aloe and stitch out the leaf details and fills. Next, we're going to stitch out the grass placement line. We're still going to use the color aloe. We've got our micro velvet for the grass. You can see this one's easy to figure out the nap. So we want to place it so when you brush it down, it lies nice and flat. We want to go ahead and cover that. I'm going to add a good bit of tape to that to make sure it stays in place, and then we will stitch the tack down and trim. I'm going to remove the tape, and then we want to trim everything outside of the tack down line. Then we're going to stitch out the decorative outline. That's going to be the last step for this block. The grass detail has stitched out. It looks really good. You'll see that when we go to trim this block. We're getting ready to start flower 3. This block, for some reason, even though we've already done the background quilting, is starting with a background placement line, place the background fabric, and then stitching the tack down line. We've already done that because we're using the background quilting. We need to advance through these steps. So needle minus plus, the double down arrow is going to move through a whole step. I need to go until I see leaves. That's what I want to see. We're going to start right there. We're going to use the color aloe and stitch out the stem and leaves fills. We're going to switch to the color Clover and stitch out the grass tufts and the leaves detail. We're going to switch back to Aloe, and we're going to do the same thing we just did on flower 2 with the grass. We're going to have the grass placement line, place the grass micro velvet, tape it into place, stitch out the tack down, trim away the extra, and then stitch the little grass top decorative detail. I'm going to go ahead and run that all together. It's exactly the same as what we just did. Switch to the color Butter. We're going to stitch out the flower placement line. We've got micro velvet for this one. You want to place that so the nap is going down. I'm going to add some tape. We'll stitch the tack down, trim everything outside the tack down line, and then we're going to have a couple steps for detail. So I'll stop after the tack down line because we're going to be changing our thread color. Go ahead and remove your tape, trim everything that's outside of the tack down line, and then we're going to switch to linen and stitch out the flower details. We're going to go back to the color Butter and we're going to stitch out the flower decorative outline. That's our last step for this block. I forgot to hit the button for that, and you can see that the details have stitched. We're all done with all 3 of these blocks. Let's go ahead and trim these 3, and then we'll work on the butterfly block. I've got this out of the hoop. I want to go ahead and separate the 3 blocks from each other. That'll make it easier to trim each of the individual blocks. Let's start with flower 3. It needs to be trimmed to 2.5 by 6.5. There's no orange pop ruler for this. I have a 2.5 inch wide ruler, and I also have a 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. I'm going to use both of these to trim this block. I'm going to start with the 6.5 portion and lay that down. Look for those stitch lines. Make sure it's nice and straight. I can also line up a line on the ruler with the stitch line underneath. That helps me get a reference here, here, and here. I know it's nice and straight. Not always advisable to do the backboard cutting, but I'm tall, I can reach it easily, and I've got long arms, so I cut it that way. Now we're ready to do the 2.5 inch portion. I'm going to take my 2.5 inch wide ruler, line up a straight line with the straight edge that I just cut, and then line up those lines with the stitch lines. I could put this on a rotating cutting mat as well. I'll probably use that for the other blocks. I just happened to grab the rulers really quick for this. So we'll go ahead and cut that and cut this, and then this one will be done. We can set that aside. Really pretty. It came out really nice. Nice detail on the flower, the leaves, and the grass. Let's go ahead and trim flower 2 first. These both trim, flower 1 and flower 2, to 4.5 by 6.5. Sorry for the barking. We're just about done with all the work being done here, so hopefully soon we'll have the curtains in. I'll have all the lighting issues straightened out. There won't be barking. You'll just always have the birds. They're always going to be there. Get this all nice and lined up, and then we're going to trim this block. Flower 1 has these trimming guides. It says to place the trimming guides in the top corners. When I look at the trimming guides, they're pretty much right on top of the trimming lines that were there in the first place. This is almost exact. This is exactly on. This one looks a little bit shifted over, so I'm not sure why this block has these and the other block doesn't. And honestly, it doesn't look like it's making a difference. Line it up real nice with my orange pop rulers and get that trimmed. We're ready to move on to the butterfly block. The background quilting for this says 4.5 by 10.5, the 4 by 10 design. I'm going to get my 8 by 12 hoop for this one. I'll load up the light mesh cutaway and we'll head over to the machine, which used to be this way, but now it's that way. Let's go ahead and load our files for the butterfly block. We'll start with the background quilting. We're going to need KDQ 528, Insect 7 4 by 10. Right down here, I'm going to go ahead and hit set and then add, and we will add our embroidery file. Hi everybody, a quick note, check your instructions for this on page 39. It talks about sliding the embroidery file down to line up the bottom, and that will make the grass get stitched into the seam. I didn't do that. I don't think it's going to be crucial. It's going to turn out fine, but have a look at that and make sure to slide that file down if you'd like to do that. I have my 8x12 hoop on the machine. The color linen is loaded. We're going to go ahead and run through everything up through the background quilting. Same steps as before. The background quilting is done. We're going to start this block with the color Clover, and we're going to stitch out the grass tuft fill. Next, we're going to switch to the color Aloe. We're going to stitch out the stems and leaves fills, and then we're going to work on the grass. If you were paying attention to flower number 3, you probably noticed my micro velvet was a lot longer than it needed to be. I thought I'd just cut it that way. I did not look forward to this block. That long piece was supposed to be for this block. This little piece was supposed to be for the other block. So when we stitch out the placement line for the grass, I'm going to have a look and see if this happens to be long enough. If it's not, I have an option of putting 2 pieces together and having a line down the middle, which probably wouldn't be too bad because it's micro velvet. Let's go ahead and put Aloe on, and we'll stitch out the stems and leaves fill and the grass placement line. Then we'll get to see if it fits. Here's the one piece, and here's the other piece. I'm going to try splicing them together and see how it looks. Now I have to be careful because this has the nap, so I need to make sure that I get the clean edge here. This needs to be cleaned up. And I'm going to put some of this on the back. This is Drit's Stitch Witchery. It's a fusible bonding web. I'm going to iron that on from the back side to splice the 2 pieces together, and we'll see how it looks. Here's the back side. The Stitch Witchery fuses things together, so I couldn't just lay it down on the micro velvet. Let's look at it. I'm going to lay it down and have a look. The other choice I have is I have leftover felt. It's almost the same color. I could use felt. Now the other 2 blocks have the micro velvet. What I'm going to do is look at where they are in the quilt. Here's the blocks with the micro velvet. Here and here next to each other. The butterfly block is down here behind her arm. Here's the micro velvet. The felt. I like the color of the micro velvet better. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to slide it as far over to the side as I can to try and get that little line off to the side. So hopefully it won't be as noticeable. I think it'll end up looking fine. When it's in the quilt and when you're standing away from it, you're never going to know it's there. I'm going to put some tape on this, and then we'll stitch the tack down. Once you've got that tacked down, go ahead and remove the tape. Trim everything outside of the tack down line, and we're going to stitch the grass top decorative outline still in the color Aloe. It's looking good. I'm going to switch to the color Butter, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for flower 2. We've got our micro velvet, again checking the nap, making sure it's the right direction. Got the nap the right way, and we have a thread color called Butter. Both of those sound really good right about now. Naps and butter. Make sure it's taped into place, and we'll stitch the tack down and then trim everything outside the tack down line. Next, we're going to stitch out the decorative outline. We're going to switch to linen, and we're going to work on flower 1. Flower 1 is the same shape as flower 2. It is also micro velvet. It's going to be the same thing. Placement line, tape down your micro velvet, stitch the tack down, remove the tape and trim, and then stitch the decorative outline. I'm going to go ahead and run that all together. Once flower 1 is complete, we're going to switch to the color Cappuccino, and we're going to stitch out the flower center base placement lines. We're going to be using Flexi Foam today. I grabbed a piece of scrap flexi foam from my pile of scraps. I think it's going to be big enough easily. Go ahead and cover the flower center base placement lines with your flexi foam. Your piece is probably a square. I'm going to tape top and bottom to make sure this doesn't move, and then we're going to stitch out the tack down lines. Go ahead and remove your tape and trim away everything that's outside of the little flower centers. Once you have that trimmed, you want to get your flower center fabric. Go ahead and make sure they're covered. Add some tape. Then we're going to stitch the tack down, trim everything that's outside of the tack down line, and stitch the flower center decorative outline. Next, we're going to stitch out the ladybug. We're going to use the color Hickory first, and we're going to stitch out the ladybug head and body fills, and then switch to Monarch and stitch out the wings, and then go back to Hickory and stitch out the spots. I'm going to go ahead and run that together. The ladybug is all stitched out. We're going to switch to the color Monarch, and we're going to stitch the butterfly placement line. Grab your mylar for your butterfly, and we're going to cover the butterfly placement line with the mylar and tape it into place. Now the mylar kind of has a striped effect to it, so I'm going to tilt mine a little bit like that, so the stripes run up and down with the butterfly. After you have it taped in place, we're going to stitch out the butterfly upper wings, tack down, and decorative fill, and we leave the color Monarch on for that step. We're going to switch to the color Tango and stitch out the lower wings, tack down, and decorative fill. Before we stitch the next step, it says to remove the tape. I'm going to switch back to Monarch and stitch out the lower wings detail. The next step says to tear the mylar close to the stitch line. Let's give it a shot. Let's go ahead and trim some. Kind of get it started, and then see if it tears. Yep, we are going to put a satin outline around this. So tear, use your snips, do whatever you're most comfortable with. There we go. It's kind of like perforated paper. Just took it a minute to get going. So tear your mylar away, and then we're going to put this back on the machine, and we're going to stitch the upper wing satin outline in the color Monarch, which should be on your machine right now. We just stitched out with Monarch. Next, we're going to switch back to the color Tawny, and we're going to stitch the lower wing satin outline. And the last thing we're going to stitch out is in the color Hickory. We're going to stitch out the butterfly body fill. All done with this block, let's go ahead and get it trimmed. I've got my block out of the hoop. This block is an odd size. 4.5 by 10.5 is the finished size when we're done trimming. And they have us using the 3 rectangle orange pop rulers, and cutting here, then pulling out the 2 center ones, and then using the big one and cutting top to bottom. I'm going to use a regular ruler today and show you how to trim that without the orange pop rulers. This is my 6.5, 12.5. We know that it trims to 4.5 wide, so I'm just going to start by lining up along the stitch line. You can feel it, and I can see the 4, and there's 4.5. So I can move that and line up the 4.5 line along the stitching line here to be sure that I've got that lined up. And then I'm looking for the thread at the top, and I'm looking for 10.5. Here's the 10.5 down here. Slide that up. My 10.5 lines up here. I'm lined up along the edge. 4, 4.5. I've got 4.5 by 10.5 measured on these 2 sides. Let's go ahead and trim these 2 sides. Just put a lot of pressure on that ruler so it doesn't slip. And then we're going to turn the block and trim the other 2 sides. Line it up straight, 10.5. There's the 10.5, and I'm looking for 4.5. I want that 4.5 on that stitching line. Let's go ahead and cut that, and then we'll measure. So I can see my stitching all the way around. That's because I'm using the regular ruler. I'm going to measure. So line up the outside. Here's 4.5. It's a little bit too big. I'm going to line up the top here. And the 10.5 is pretty much spot on. This needs to be a little bit tighter to get to 4.5. So I'm going to take just a little bit off. I am so sorry about the noise. I really can't do anything about that. Line that up and just trim a bit because 4.5 is like right there. See that extra? But I don't want to trim it all from this side. I want to sort of balance it between the two sides. So we'll take a little bit off each side and then remeasure. Nice and straight, 4.5. It's fine, looks good. I've got the top lined up. Where's my 10.5? Looks good. That was our last block today. Let's get a look at everything and talk about what we're going to do next week. I want to show you the strawberry block. I dissolved the thread on this and you can see how the leaves lift off. Remember we used the water-soluble bobbin and top thread. I took a spray bottle of water and I just sprayed the back threads, got it nice and wet, let it sit for a little bit, and then I was able to flip them up from the front. I did that before I started filming today. It dried really fast. When we put these in our quilt, we've got our flower blocks here. These two are going to go next to each other. And this one is going to go like that. Kind of get a nice preview of what this is going to look like as it gets pieced together in the quilt. This is going to go in a different corner, and then we've got our strawberry block. Thank you so much for joining me for video number 5 for the Sippin' on Sunshine quilt. Next week will be video number 6. We're going to stitch out the picnic block, soda block, refreshments, and the grapes block. I hope to see you back then. Thanks for quilting along with me. See you next time.